The last rays of sunlight filtered through the dense pine forest as Ethan Webb made his final rounds. 6 years as a wildlife ranger in the remote Montana wilderness had taught him to trust his instincts, and tonight, something felt off. He paused, adjusting the straps of his backpack while scanning the tree line. The forest had gone quiet, no bird calls, no rustling underbrush. Just silence. Probably just a mountain lion passing through, he muttered to himself, but his hand instinctively moved to the tranquilizer gun at his hip. The flash came without warning, a brilliant streak of light cutting across the darkening sky, followed by a thunderous boom that seemed to shake the very mountains. Ethan staggered, nearly dropping his flashlight as the ground trembled beneath his boots. Whatever it was, it had come down close. "Control, this is Ranger Webb," he spoke into his radio. "Possible meteorite impact about 2 miles northeast of Lookout Ridge. I'm going to investigate." Static crackled before a voice responded. "Copy that, Webb. Be careful out there. Storm's rolling in fast." Ethan's trek through the increasingly dark forest took longer than expected. The rain started as a gentle patter against the canopy above but quickly intensified into a downpour. By the time he reached the impact site, he was soaked to the bone, his flashlight beam cutting weakly through the curtain of water. What he found wasn't a meteorite. The small craft, if that's what it was, had carved a 20-foot gash through the forest floor before coming to rest against an enormous pine. It resembled nothing Ethan had ever seen before, sleek, metallic, with no visible windows or doors, roughly the size of a small car. Most strangely, despite the violent landing, it remained largely intact. "Control," he began, raising his radio, but stopped when he spotted movement near the craft. Someone, or something, was crawling away from the wreckage. Ethan approached cautiously, flashlight trained on the figure. "Hello. Are you hurt? I'm here to help." The figure froze, then slowly turned toward him. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She appeared almost human, a woman with delicate features and silver-white hair that seemed to shimmer even in the darkness. But the resemblance ended there. Intricate patterns of blue-green light traced across her visible skin like luminous tattoos, pulsing slightly with each labored breath. Her eyes, when they met his, were large and entirely violet, with no visible pupils or whites. "Help," she managed in accented but clear English, before collapsing face-first into the mud. Ethan's training kicked in. Whoever she was, she needed medical attention. He knelt beside her, noting the strange fabric of her clothing, like liquid metal that somehow remained soft to the touch. A dark purple fluid, blood, seeped from a gash on her forehead and another along her side. "I've got you," he said, knowing she likely couldn't hear him. "You're going to be okay." His cabin was closer than headquarters, a 20-minute hike versus over an hour. With the storm worsening and the woman's condition unknown, Ethan made his decision. He carefully lifted her, surprised by how light she was despite being nearly his height, and began the trek home. The woman remained unconscious throughout the journey and as Ethan carried her inside his small but well-equipped cabin. He laid her gently on his bed, hesitating before peeling back the strange fabric to assess her injuries. The cut along her side looked painful but not life-threatening, at least assuming her anatomy was somewhat similar to human. Her bioluminescent markings had dimmed, pulsing weakly like a fading heartbeat. Ethan cleaned and dressed her wounds as best he could, using his first aid kit and hoping whatever antiseptics humans used wouldn't harm her. "What am I doing?" he muttered to himself, running a hand through his damp hair. Protocol demanded he report this immediately. An alien, a real, living alien, had crash-landed in his forest. Government agencies would need to be notified. Scientists. The military. Yet something held him back. The memory of those violet eyes, filled with fear and desperation. The way she had said, "Help," not a demand, but a plea. As if responding to his thoughts, the woman stirred, her markings brightening slightly. Ethan stepped back, suddenly aware of how intimidating he might appear to her, a tall, bearded stranger hovering over her in an unfamiliar place. "You're safe," he said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I found you near your vehicle. You were hurt." Her eyes flickered open, taking in her surroundings with rapid movements before settling on him. For a long moment, she simply stared, her chest rising and falling in quickening breaths. "Where am I?" she finally asked, her voice melodic despite the obvious pain behind it. "My cabin. I'm a forest ranger, I protect this wilderness. My name is Ethan Webb." She attempted to sit up, wincing visibly. The luminous patterns across her skin flared brighter momentarily, then settled back to a gentle pulse. "Careful," Ethan cautioned. "You've got a nasty cut along your side." "Thank you, Ethan Webb," she said, pronouncing each syllable of his name with precision. "I am called Talia." "Just Talia?" A small smile touched her lips. "My full name would be difficult for you to pronounce." Outside, lightning cracked, illuminating the cabin in harsh white light. Talia flinched, her markings flashing in response. "The storm will pass," Ethan assured her, moving to stoke the fire in the small wood stove. "You're welcome to stay here until you recover." "You are not afraid?" Talia asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "I am not, like you." Ethan considered this as he added another log to the fire. Was he afraid? He probably should be. Yet what he felt most prominently was wonder. "I've always believed we can't be alone in the universe," he said finally. "Though I never expected to make first contact in my own backyard." This elicited another small smile. "Not first contact. Your people and mine have history. Though not many of your kind remember it." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, Talia's eyes drifted closed, her energy seemingly spent. The luminous patterns across her skin continued their gentle rhythm, like a visual heartbeat in blues and greens. Ethan settled into his armchair across the room, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. He should call this in, he knew that. Whatever was happening here was far beyond his pay grade. But something in Talia's eyes, in the way she had looked at him with such vulnerability and trust, made him hesitate. One night, he decided. He would give her one night to rest and recover. Tomorrow would bring decisions enough. As the storm raged outside, Ethan watched over his unexpected visitor, wondering what strange twist of fate had brought her to his forest, and why he felt so inexplicably drawn to protect her. He didn't yet know that by morning, his life would never be the same. Part 2, Worlds Between Us. Talia awoke to unfamiliar sensations, the rough texture of woven fabric against her skin, the scent of pine and something cooking, and the gentle sound of rain pattering against a solid structure. For a moment, panic seized her as her consciousness scrambled to make sense of her surroundings. Then the memories flooded back, the sabotage, the emergency landing, the tall human with kind eyes. She shifted slightly, noting with surprise that the pain in her side had diminished to a dull ache. Her biomarkers, the luminous patterns humans might mistake for decorative markings, had already begun the healing process, knitting damaged tissue and neutralizing potential infections. A quick internal assessment told her she would recover fully, given time and proper nutrition. Pushing herself to a sitting position, Talia observed the dwelling. It was simple but functional, constructed primarily of processed plant material, wood, she recalled from her briefings. The space was small but tidy, with minimal decoration save for a few framed images and what appeared to be preserved plant specimens. A dwelling suited to a solitary existence. The human, Ethan Webb, stood with his back to her, manipulating something over a heat source. His shoulders were broad, his movements deliberate and efficient. Everything about him spoke of capability and strength, yet he had shown her only gentleness. "You're awake," he said without turning, his auditory perception impressive for his species. "How are you feeling?" "Improved," she replied, testing her voice. "My biomarkers have initiated cellular regeneration." Now he did turn, brows raised in what she recognized as surprise. "You're, what?" Talia gestured to the luminous patterns visible on her hands and wrists. These aren't decorative. They're part of my physiological systems. They process energy, regulate bodily functions, and accelerate healing. Ethan approached, carrying a steaming vessel. That's incredible. Here, I made soup. I don't know if it's compatible with your system, but it's the best I can offer. She accepted the bowl, analyzing its contents visually before taking a tentative taste. The flavor profile was unfamiliar but not unpleasant, and her internal sensors detected no toxins that would affect her physiology. Thank you. This is acceptable nutrition. A small curve appeared at the corner of his mouth, a partial smile, she noted. High praise for my cooking skills. Talia tilted her head, studying him. You haven't contacted your authorities. It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. No. Not yet. I figured you deserved a chance to explain what's happening before I bring in people who might misunderstand the situation. His consideration surprised her. The briefings had suggested humans would respond with fear or aggression to her kind, yet this one showed remarkable restraint and compassion. I am a diplomatic envoy from the Astral Collective, she explained, watching his reactions carefully. My mission to your planet was sanctioned by both my government and certain factions within yours. Certain factions? Ethan repeated, settling into a chair near the bed. Your species isn't unified in governance. There are those among your leadership who believe contact between our worlds should proceed gradually, while others prefer isolation. I was en route to meet with the former when my craft was sabotaged. Ethan's expression darkened. Someone tried to kill you. Extremists, Talia confirmed. They exist among both our peoples, those who believe contact between different worlds leads only to corruption and conflict. She paused, considering how much to reveal. My father was the chief architect of the proposed alliance between Earth and the Collective. He was assassinated 3 weeks ago. I volunteered to continue his work. I'm sorry about your father, Ethan said, genuine sympathy in his voice. Talia nodded, appreciating his empathy but unable to process the grief that still felt raw and overwhelming. The rendezvous point is a facility approximately 200 kilometers from here. I need to reach it within 7 standard days. Or what happens? The window for diplomatic negotiations closes. The isolationists gain power. And the opportunity for peaceful contact between our worlds may be lost for generations. Ethan was silent for a long moment, processing her words. Talia used the opportunity to study him more closely. His features were striking by any standard, strong jaw partially obscured by facial hair, deep-set eyes that reminded her of the forests of her homeworld, lines around his mouth that suggested he smiled infrequently but genuinely. Why do you live alone in this wilderness? She asked, curiosity overcoming protocol. The question seemed to surprise him. I prefer the solitude. People are complicated. Nature makes sense. You isolate yourself, yet you didn't hesitate to help a stranger, an alien. This seems contradictory. Ethan shrugged, a human gesture she recognized as casual dismissal. Just because I prefer my own company doesn't mean I don't care about others. And you needed help. Such a simple answer to what seemed a profound contradiction. Talia found herself fascinated by this human who defied her expectations at every turn. May I ask you something? Ethan said after another moment of silence. Of course. You said our peoples have history, but none of us remember it. What did you mean by that? Talia's biomarkers pulsed slightly faster, a physiological response to emotional stimuli she couldn't entirely control. Approximately 3,000 of your years ago, a scouting vessel from the Collective made contact with early human civilizations. The interactions were limited, but impactful. Many of your ancient myths about gods or celestial visitors originated from these encounters. Ethan's eyes widened. You're saying your people are responsible for, what? Greek gods? Egyptian deities? Some, she admitted. though humans have impressive imaginations and elaborated significantly on the original encounters. The collective eventually implemented a non-interference directive, believing your species needed to develop independently. And now your technology has advanced to a point where isolation is no longer practical or beneficial. Humans have begun exploring beyond your solar system. Contact is inevitable. The question is whether it will happen through careful diplomacy or chaotic circumstance. A silence fell between them, heavy with implications. Outside, the rain had stopped, and sunlight filtered through the windows, casting the cabin in a warm glow. Talia noticed how the light caught in Ethan's hair, revealing strands of gold among the brown. "I will help you reach this facility," he said finally. "But I need to know exactly what I'm getting involved in. Who are these extremists? Will they come looking for you?" "Almost certainly," Talia confirmed. "My craft's emergency beacon will have activated upon impact. While it's encoded to transmit only to collective frequencies, sophisticated scanning technology could detect it." "Then we need to move quickly," Ethan said, rising. "I can request leave, family emergency or something. We can take my truck most of the way, then find alternate transportation if we're being tracked." His immediate commitment to helping her was unexpected, touching something deep within Talia. Among her people, such actions would create a bond of significance, a life debt not easily discharged. "Why would you risk yourself for me? My presence puts you in danger." Ethan paused in his preparations, turning to look at her directly. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because—" He hesitated, seeming to search for words. "Because meeting you feels important. Like something I was meant to do." The sentiment was so simple, yet so profound that Talia felt her biomarkers pulse in response, the patterns on her skin brightening momentarily. Such emotional honesty was rare among her people, where centuries of diplomatic training had cultivated careful restraint. "I lack adequate words to express my gratitude," she said softly. "Then don't try," he replied with that small smile again. "Save your strength for healing. We'll leave at first light tomorrow." That evening, as Ethan prepared supplies for their journey, Talia observed him with growing curiosity. He moved with purpose and efficiency, occasionally explaining his choices: warm clothing for her, food supplies, first aid equipment, communication devices. "You'll need to keep your differences hidden when we're around other humans," he explained, handing her a hooded jacket and gloves. "At least until we reach the facility." Talia nodded, understanding the necessity. "I can modulate my biomarkers to minimize luminosity, though it will slow my healing." "If it becomes necessary, don't," Ethan said firmly. "Your recovery is more important than secrecy." His concern for her welfare created an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. Talia had been raised in the diplomatic corps, trained from childhood to prioritize mission over personal comfort or safety. Ethan's different priorities were refreshing. As night fell, he insisted she keep the bed while he made a makeshift sleeping arrangement on the floor nearby. In the darkness, with only her softly glowing biomarkers providing light, Talia found herself studying his sleeping form, the rise and fall of his chest, the relaxation of his usually vigilant expression. Something was happening between them that transcended mere gratitude or obligation. Something neither her diplomatic training nor her limited understanding of human emotions had prepared her for. Her mission was clear: reach the facility, complete the diplomatic process her father had begun, ensure peaceful relations between their peoples. Nothing should distract from that purpose. Yet as sleep claimed her, Talia's last thoughts were not of her mission or the dangers ahead, but of the strange human sleeping just a few feet away, the one who had shown her kindness when she expected fear, and trust when she had done nothing to earn it. For the first time since her father's death, Talia felt something beyond grief and determination. She felt hope. Varric adjusted the settings on his ocular enhancer, focusing on the cabin nestled among the earth trees. His scaled skin blended perfectly with the night shadows as he observed the dwelling from his vantage point. The planet's atmosphere felt uncomfortably dense in his lungs, its gravity slightly stronger than his homeworld, but these were minor inconveniences compared to the potential reward. The luminary female was inside, his scanner had detected her unique biomarker signature. With her was a human male, likely unaware of the treasure he was harboring. Varric's thin lips curled into what passed for a smile among his species. The council had promised him enough credits to live in luxury for a decade if he returned with her, alive and unharmed. Dead would pay half as much, but would be considerably simpler. He tapped the communication device at his throat. Target located. Proceeding with extraction at first light. Confirm non-lethal protocols, came the immediate response, the voice coldly professional. Varric hissed softly in annoyance. Confirmed. Though I maintain lethal would be more efficient. The council requires her alive. Her knowledge dies with her. The connection terminated, leaving Varric alone with his thoughts. He settled into position, his reptilian metabolism slowing to conserve energy during the wait. The luminary female would be no match for him. The human would be even less trouble. Dawn was still hours away. Someone's watching us, Ethan said quietly as he packed the last supplies into his backpack. He hadn't looked out the window or made any obvious indication of his awareness, but Talia had noticed how his movements had become more deliberate over the past hour, his attention occasionally fixing on nothing in particular as he listened. How do you know? She asked, keeping her voice equally low. Years in the wilderness teaches you to sense when you're being hunted, he replied, subtly checking the hunting knife strapped to his belt. We're leaving, but not through the front door. Talia nodded, grateful again for his competence. Her time on Earth had given her a new appreciation for humans' adaptive capabilities. The briefings had emphasized their technological inferiority but failed to account for their remarkable instincts and resourcefulness. There's a cellar trapdoor under the rug, Ethan continued, casually moving through the cabin as if preparing a normal breakfast. It leads to a tunnel that comes out about 50 yards behind the cabin. It's tight, but will fit. A secret escape tunnel from your home? Is this standard for human dwellings? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. No. I'm just paranoid. Former military. Old habits. This was new information. You were a warrior. Special Forces. 6 years. That was, before. The way he said, before, suggested pain, loss. Talia wanted to inquire further but sensed now wasn't the time. Ethan knelt by the fireplace, ostensibly adjusting the logs but actually removing the rug to reveal a trapdoor. When I say go, we move fast and silent. Stay close. Talia nodded, adjusting the hood of her jacket to ensure her luminous features remained hidden. Her side still ached, but the wound had closed cleanly. She would be able to keep pace. Ethan's head tilted slightly, listening. His body tensed. Now. They moved with synchronized precision born of shared danger. Ethan lifted the trapdoor silently, gesturing for her to descend first. The tunnel was narrow, earthen, supported by rough wooden beams, and smelled of damp soil. Talia had to crouch to avoid hitting her head. Ethan followed, pulling the trapdoor closed behind them and plunging them into darkness. For humans, the darkness would be absolute, but Talia's biomarkers provided enough soft blue-green light to illuminate their path. Ethan's eyebrows raised in appreciation. Handy feature, he whispered, taking the lead as they moved through the tunnel. They emerged into the pre-dawn forest, a thin mist hanging between the trees. Without hesitation, Ethan led them away from the cabin, moving with surprising quietness for his size. Talia matched his movements, her natural grace aided by her slightly lower body density compared to humans. They had covered nearly a mile when the explosion shattered the morning silence. Ethan pulled Talia behind a large tree as they both turned to see smoke rising from the direction of the cabin. They destroyed your home, Talia said, horror evident in her voice. Ethan's expression hardened, but he showed no other reaction. It's just a building. Come on, we need to reach the truck. It's hidden about 2 miles east of here. His pragmatism impressed her, though she sensed the loss affected him more than he revealed. They continued through the forest at a brisk pace, Ethan occasionally adjusting their course to utilize natural cover. "Who are they?" he asked as they navigated around a small ravine. "You're extremists." Talia shook her head. "Unlikely. The explosion suggests mercenaries, probably Saurian. They're known for destructive tactics and have worked with isolationist factions before." "Saurian, like reptiles?" "Yes. Highly evolved, intelligent, and utterly ruthless. Their homeworld is resource-poor, so many work as bounty hunters or mercenaries." Ethan processed this information with remarkable calm. "Strengths? Weaknesses?" "Physically stronger than humans, enhanced senses, particularly vision and smell. But they struggle in colder environments, and their movements can become sluggish." "Good to know," Ethan said grimly, checking his watch. "The temperature's dropping. There's a storm front moving in. Might work to our advantage." They reached the hidden vehicle, a rugged, all-terrain truck partially concealed under a camouflage tarp, just as the first snowflakes began to fall. Ethan quickly uncovered it, checking underneath and around the engine before declaring it safe. "Get in," he instructed, opening the passenger door for her. "We'll take Forest Service roads as long as possible. Less chance of being spotted." As they drove through the increasingly heavy snowfall, Talia studied Ethan's profile. His jaw was set, eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, hands sure on the steering wheel. He had abandoned his life, his home, his possessions, his safety, to help her, a stranger from another world. "I've caused you great harm," she said softly. "Your dwelling, your occupation." "I made my choice," he interrupted, voice firm but not unkind. "And I'd make it again." "Why?" Ethan was silent for a long moment, negotiating a particularly rough section of road before answering. "Because in the 6 years since I left the military, this is the first time I've felt like I'm doing something that matters." The confession hung between them, weighted with unspoken emotion. Talia felt her biomarkers pulse in response, a physiological reaction she couldn't control. Among her people, such an admission would signify deep personal connection. "What happened?" she asked gently. "During your military service?" Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "A mission went wrong. Civilians died. Children. I was following orders, but..." He shook his head. "After that, I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't trust the people giving the orders. Couldn't trust myself. The forest seemed like the only place left where I couldn't hurt anyone." Talia considered his words carefully. "Yet you trust yourself to help me. That's different. This is just us making choices. No command structure, no political agenda. Just doing what's right." His simplification of what was, in reality, an interstellar diplomatic crisis made Talia smile despite their circumstances. How very human, to reduce complex geopolitical machinations to a matter of personal ethics. Their progress slowed as the snow intensified. The Forest Service road became increasingly treacherous, the truck's wheels occasionally losing traction on hidden ice. Ethan handled the vehicle expertly, but his expression grew more concerned. "At this rate, we won't make the main highway before nightfall," he said, checking the GPS unit. "There's an old hunting cabin about 10 miles ahead. We might need to shelter there until the storm passes." Talia nodded her agreement, then stiffened suddenly, her biomarkers flaring brightly enough to be visible through her clothing. "Stop the vehicle." Ethan reacted instantly, bringing the truck to a careful halt. "What is it?" "We're being tracked," she said, her eyes closed in concentration as her biomarkers processed information beyond human perception. "Short-range scanner frequencies. Very faint, but present." Without question, Ethan put the truck in reverse, carefully turning around on the narrow road. "How close?" "Within 5 kilometers, approaching rapidly." He nodded grimly. "Then we abandon the truck." They're probably tracking it somehow. He pulled off onto a barely visible side path, driving just far enough to conceal the vehicle from the main road. We go on foot from here. The storm that had seemed an inconvenience now became their ally, the heavy snowfall obscuring their tracks almost as quickly as they made them. Ethan led the way, moving with purpose despite the worsening conditions. Talia followed closely, grateful for the warm clothing he had provided, though her physiology was naturally more tolerant of cold than a human's would be. After nearly an hour of difficult travel, Ethan held up a hand for her to stop. Ahead, barely visible through the swirling snow, stood a small, weathered structure, little more than 4 walls and a roof. The old hunting cabin, he explained, voice nearly lost in the wind. Not much, but it'll shelter us from the worst of the storm. The cabin's interior was dusty and Spartan, a single room containing a small wood stove, a crude table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot. Ethan immediately set about securing the door and windows while Talia examined the wood stove. I can ignite this, she offered, placing her hand against the cold metal. Her biomarkers glowed intensely as she channeled energy through her palm, heating the stove from within. Within moments, the metal began to warm. Ethan paused in his work, watching with undisguised fascination. That's incredibly useful. A simple application of energy manipulation, she explained, though she was pleased by his appreciation. My people evolved this ability to survive our homeworld's extreme temperature variations. With the stove warming the small space, they took stock of their situation. The storm showed no signs of abating, which provided cover but also delayed their journey. The facility was still over 100 miles away, and their pursuer, or pursuers, were closing in. We should rest while we can, Ethan decided, removing his snow-covered outer layer. I'll take first watch. Talia shook her head. My physiology requires less rest than yours. I'll watch while you sleep. After a brief argument, Ethan reluctantly agreed, settling onto the cot while Talia positioned herself by the window, maintaining a dim glow from her biomarkers to preserve her night vision. Hours passed in comfortable silence, the only sounds the howling wind outside and Ethan's steady breathing. Talia found herself studying him again, intrigued by the contradictions he embodied, gentle yet formidable, solitary yet selfless. Her diplomatic training had taught her to analyze and categorize other species, but Ethan defied easy classification. More troubling were her own reactions to him. The acceleration of her biomarkers in his presence, the unusual warmth she felt when he looked at her with those forest green eyes, the inexplicable concern for his welfare that sometimes overshadowed her mission priorities. These responses were not included in any protocol. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, Ethan stirred, rising from the cot to join her at the window. You should have woken me, he said, voice rough with sleep. You needed rest. So do you. His concern was evident even in the dim light. I'm fine, she assured him. The storm is beginning to lessen. We should be able to continue at first light. Ethan nodded, his gaze moving from the window to her face. Even in the darkness, she could feel the intensity of his observation. Your markings, they're glowing more brightly near me. Do they respond to proximity? Talia felt an unfamiliar sensation, what humans might call embarrassment. They respond to emotional states. It's involuntary. What emotion causes them to brighten like that? The directness of his question was both disconcerting and strangely exhilarating. Among her people, such personal inquiries would be considered inappropriate without established intimacy. Connection, she admitted softly. Recognition of significance. Ethan's hand moved slowly, telegraphing his intent, giving her time to withdraw if she wished. When she remained still, he gently touched her face, his fingers tracing the luminous patterns along her cheekbone. The contact sent waves of sensation through her biomarkers, causing them to pulse vibrantly. Is this okay? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Yes, she breathed, surprising herself with the immediacy of her response. The distance between them disappeared as Ethan leaned forward, hesitating just a breath away from her lips. Talia closed the final gap, pressing her mouth to his in a gesture she had studied but never experienced. The reality far exceeded the academic understanding, a rush of sensations that caused her biomarkers to flare brilliantly, illuminating the small cabin in ethereal blue-green light. When they separated, Ethan's expression held wonder mixed with concern. "I don't want to complicate things for you. Your mission is still my priority," she finished for him. "But this connection between us, it isn't separate from that mission. It's part of what I'm fighting for, the possibility that our species can find understanding. Connection." His smile was gentle, genuine. "Pretty big implications for a kiss in a snowstorm." "My people believe significant moments echo across timelines," she said, allowing herself to lean against him as they both gazed out at the snow-covered forest. "That some connections are meant to be, regardless of the circumstances that bring them about." Ethan's arm encircled her waist, careful of her healing wound. "That sounds suspiciously like destiny. I didn't think advanced civilizations believed in such things." "Advanced doesn't mean we have all the answers," Talia replied. "Some mysteries transcend technological development. They remained that way until dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight glinting off endless fields of pristine snow. The storm had passed, leaving a transformed landscape in its wake, beautiful, unmarred, and dangerously exposed. As they prepared to continue their journey, a sudden, high-pitched whine pierced the morning silence. Talia recognized it immediately. "Scanner probe," she warned, pulling Ethan away from the window. "They found us." The peaceful moment shattered as reality reasserted itself. They were still being hunted, still running toward an uncertain future. But something had changed between them, a connection formed that neither had expected but both now recognized as precious. Whatever awaited them beyond the hunting cabin, they would face it together, the forest ranger and the alien diplomat, bound by circumstances but united by choice. As they slipped out the back door into the blinding white landscape, Talia's biomarkers pulsed in perfect rhythm with Ethan's heartbeat, synchronized, aligned, resonant across the vastness that had once separated their worlds.